Ladies and gentlemen, today I have the great pleasure of introducing you to the new plugin by Submission Audio, Flatline. Flatline is a plugin that I developed with my team at Submission Audio specifically to circumvent the pitfalls that I ran into as a practicing mastering engineer, largely operating in the digital domain. In spite of using many limiters over the years, well beyond their capacities to try to achieve the sounds that I was hearing in my head, I ultimately couldn't get the one sound that I was after, namely the sound of clipping top-tier $10,000 analog to digital converters on the way back into the system. This sound has been a secret weapon of world-renowned mastering houses for the last 3 decades. Odds are, if you have a beloved record from your childhood that you love the sound of, it was likely mastered using this technique. Up until recently, it's been outside the domain of digital processing. That is, until now. What I'm going to show you today is how I mastered my good friend Plini's new record, Impulse Voices, to sound like one of 2020's greatest prog records. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. For this demo, I've selected a section at the end of the song Pan, and what we're going to listen to first is the way that a mix comes to me from my good friend Simon Grove in its completely raw state. So here we go. Very cool, right? Very full sounding mix, maybe lacking a little bit of top end excitement, maybe a bit of a bloat low mid focus. So immediately when I hear this, I know that the thing I need to do is to start to reshift the frequency balance more towards the upper mid range and the highs, get a bit more sparkle, dimensionality, and clean up the low end, make it a little bit more portable and sound a little bit tighter so we can get the levels and the kind of crispness that people expect to hear from a modern day master. So one of the first things I will say is that this is not intended to be a comprehensive mastering tutorial video. We will get to that in due time, but I want to focus mostly on Flatline's role. What we're going to do is very quickly go over the role that my other plugins in this session play. We're not going to describe them in detail, just to kind of show you what actually happens. So what we're going to do is immediately look at one of my favorite plugins for boosting top end, which is the Acoustica Audio Ivory Mark II. Now, I'm not sure if you can get this anymore. They've moved on to other versions, but this one still sounds the best. So if you can get this one, get this one. I've got the preamp in. It adds a really nice kind of upper harmonic saturation, which I intrinsically want. We've got a shelving high-end EQ at 12K boosting. It says 0.5 of a dB, but for this plugin, that's closer to about 1.5, possibly 2 dB. So we're going to listen to just the mix raw again. And now with the plugin, you can hear that crispness straight away. So that's what Ivory is doing. It's one of my favorite plugins for doing that. We have a workhorse EQ in the form of Crave EQ. Now, I'm not going to go through it band by band, but what I'm doing is filtering the low end from all channels and the sides, and then we're filtering out the mid-bass frequencies to give us more of an emphasis on the kick left over here, scoop out the mud of the bass guitar, maybe the cardboardiness of the drum shells. Then we're going to remove dimensionality from the core mid-range, somewhere around 600 to 700 hertz, and then we're boosting the upper mid-range as well, strategically. Now, I went through this very quickly, but when it comes to my actual mastering, this process can take me a very, very long time because I'm working in increments of 0.01 of a dB. So, moving on from there, we have an instance of Brainworks Townhouse bus compressor. Now, this I'm mostly using to grab the drum transients a little bit more, add a bit more movement and excitement. So we've got a 0.3 ms attack. We've got an auto release, which is the most transparent setting. We've got a 2:1 ratio, which I would never exceed for mastering. And we're just grabbing a little bit. So I'll just play it back to you guys with these 3 plugins running in concert. But we'll listen to just a raw mix first. With these 3. You can just hear that excitement, the dimensionality is coming through already, right? So that's the majority of the work, is the EQ processing and the dynamic shift. You can hear with the compressor in and out here. It's currently out. In. Just gives it more of that mid-2000s thing, you know, that thing that we love from that LA sound mixed on the 4K consoles, just that movement from the transients, that motion and that excitement. So from here on, we move to another stage, which is very important when using Flatline, namely the saturation stage. So I love using satin for this. Satin can be tailored in a way that no processor can, that I'm aware of, either digitally or in terms of hardware, to only affect the frequencies that you want. So I tend to only saturate the lower mid-range and up. I don't like the low end to be affected, so I've got a slight amount of saturation happening from the low mids and up. This is very subtle, but listen for it. It's currently out. In. It just unifies the transients, glues the whole thing together in a way that a console would, but without the negative artifacts. You can hear the transients are popping out more the moment that I bypass it. Again, more of that 2000s sound. Pretty much everything that I try to do digitally is trying to bring me a little bit closer to that bygone era of the late 90s and the 2000s. I think that's when we hit that perfect euphonic middle ground between digital processing and hardware vibes. So I'm always trying to hover around that kind of period in time. Now we get to the good stuff, Flatline, right? So we haven't leveled anything out yet. I'm going to reset this processor for us. So this is how Flatline opens up for you, right? It might open up a little bit smaller, but you can increase it to fill up the size of your screen as you would like, right? So we'll just play the mix. So one thing that's very important to note at this point in time, and especially watching the way that other people have been using and demoing Flatline to this point, the mix already sounds fantastic. You can probably tell that's the case. Now, one of the things about Flatline being based around converter clipping procedure rather than traditional limiting or intelligent maximization is the fact that you have to respect it. So if you go in and you clip top tier digital converters with a mix that's not balanced, you'll find that they crackle very quickly, even the very, very expensive units. It's not a magic process. It can give you, in my opinion, the best results that you can achieve in mastering, but you have to respect it and you have to know what you're doing. I'll say this now, that if you are a complete amateur, if you don't know what you're doing whatsoever, if everything I've talked about here is nebulous to you, Flatline may not be the idyllic product for you. It's very, very easy to use, but you need some precursor knowledge about engineering and how to prepare a mix for mastering in order to get the most out of it. There are limiters out there which will get you insane amounts of loudness, but they will do everything to your mix. They will contort the balances. They will completely shift everything in your mix to get you that level with minimal distortion, but it will just be a self-defeating endeavor because the crux of the mix will be completely ruined by that point. Flatline is the complete opposite. Most professional grade mastering engineers understand that you need to respect what you're putting into your converters. This is why we put that emphasis on preparing the mix before we got to Flatline. So now that we have a fantastic sounding mix, what you're going to hear is that Flatline is going to level it out in a way that quite simply no other software digital maximizer can at present. So let's get into it. All right, you can see by the line there, we're just about to start clipping. We're even getting a few half dB clips, all right? You're gonna hear it start to change in tonality soon, all right? Let's get to it. There we go, you can hear it grabbing the drum transients now. It's clipping the top of the snare. Yeah, nice. Getting a bit of glue out of it now. Yeah, now it's picking up that overall excitement. You can hear the harmonic saturation hitting the entire mix. And this is my level. This is the level that you're hearing on the actual final master of Plini's record. This is the exact setting that was used. Now we're gonna play with the shape knob, because this is hard clipping right now. You can hear it's burying the mix. It's burying the transients the more I go, and the more kind of, the earlier the clipping onset is. I'm going to bring this back up. There we go. 96%, perfect for Plini's impulse voices. It's a great bridge between glued, unified transients and just crispness and loudness. The lower you go on the shape, the more glued it will sound, but the more subdued it will sound at the same time. Very, very important to have this feature, something I've always required in my maximizers. So you literally have a slider between complete transparency and, quote unquote harshness. Generally when mastering, I'll hover anywhere between 90% to 100%, and you'll notice that I don't use any oversampling, and that's been are pretty much constant for me ever since I started mastering professionally and spoken to a lot of my colleagues about their own workflow. Oversampling is a bit overstated in the industry, but we'll get into that in another video. Now here's the fun part of mastering. You don't have to finish it there. So Flatline has done the bulk of the work. The mix currently sounds absolutely phenomenal, as you can hear. Even between dynamic hits, right? It still maintains that enveloping vastness when you get to the heavy section. And you can hear the dimensionality maintained in the mix. We haven't sucked up the drum transients. Absolutely beautiful. This is the sound of clipping $10,000 analog converters. It's absolutely brilliant. The fact that you have it in a software box. Now, this isn't the end. Usually in mastering, we'll tend to mix and match units. And one of the great things about this is you can pull up your other favorite maximizers. In my case, I'll be pulling up Ozone 7, using it on a very classic mode, IRC1, one I used to use well over 10 years ago now to very great effect. IRC1, IRC2, very cool limiter modes. Now, we're only doing this for a bit of extra level and a bit of extra zing. I'm actually using it for a bit extra transient control because I've got the character at about 0.2 here. And I think I've cranked up the stereo independence, so there's no emphasis on the center channel. We're diffusing everything to the sides, which is why everything is sounding nice and expansive here. So yeah, let's go from there. And of course, I'm also using the dither just in case I want to bounce this down to a 16-bit file afterward. Raw mix. Pretty magical what mastering can do for the right project, right? And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you use Flatline to achieve a world-class prog rock record master. I sincerely hope you enjoyed that walkthrough and perhaps picked up a thing or two that you didn't know going in. If you enjoy content like this that's created by people that actually work in the industry rather than just yell at a camera for a living, the subscribe button's down below, and coincidentally so is a product link. Until next time, we'll see you later.